Good morning. Welcome back to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. All right, we're talking about the Retirement Income Challenge today, right? This is a great piece from Nationwide that I wanted to share with you. And this has to do with, we talked about some of those things already, of course, as far as market risk and some of the things. We're going to, in fact, talk about some of the risk in retirement, how they differ from those prior to retirement. So, for instance, we'll show up the next slide, which is the Retirement Income Challenge, risk before retirement, things like market loss. This is one of our big concerns. Now, market loss, understanding, again, the importance of how investing in the stock market works. This is one of the biggest misconceptions I see with new clients when they're coming in, is the understanding with their portfolios. A lot of times they just kind of put things together. Maybe they have advisors that have helped them put these things together. They're they're leaning quite heavily on active management, expecting that money managers are going to be able to outperform the market and be able to provide them even with a really decent rate of return over time. The reality is that the studies show us that that just doesn't happen. The research shows that, and there's study after study on this, it shows that indexing will outperform active managers hands down over time. And this is one of the things that means that an active manager might get lucky in 1 year or a 3 year or 5 year period even, but it's only, they just got lucky. They just happen to have the right thing at the right time. If they otherwise, they would continue to repeat, and they don't. So one of the things that comes with market loss is understanding the difference between actually investing in such a way that you could lose your money, or investing in such a way where, yes, you're going to have volatility, where you'll have negative years. Statistically, about 1 in 4 years in the stock market are going to be negative years if you're invested properly, okay? If you've got the right asset allocation and understand how to do that. And this is how you mix together certain index funds is the best way to do this. And this is done through understanding well, one of them is the three-factor model that Dr. Fama developed. He won a Nobel Prize in 2013. I'm jumping ahead of a lot of different things here, but let me just put it together this way. Asset allocation, again, is the biggest determinant of what kind of return you're going to get in your investments and the risk that you're going to have there as far as your volatility, not against market loss. You can have those negative years, but understanding if you're properly invested and you got thousands of companies in your portfolio, it will come back. You just need to write it out. And if we put the plan together properly, we can minimize that volatility and spring back faster, all right? Inflation is another one. Now, when it comes to inflation, planning for inflation, this is why we have to invest in the first place, or how we have to put together plans. We can't just park our money in a savings or checking account, right? We can't just use CDs or fixed annuities that just pay limited amounts of interest. We need something that's going to give us enough to stay ahead of inflation and taxes. Otherwise, we're losing the purchasing power on our dollars. Well, those risks before retirement, guess what? As you see on the right there, risk in retirement, they're amplified. They're even greater. That market loss can be even more difficult once you're retired and you no longer have income. You can't leave that money alone to ride out volatility. That can be a real issue in terms of greater potential for running out of money, which is why we have to protect against market losses. Inflation, we have to plan even more for inflation. You know, it's amazing when I sit down and we go over the report that I do up for clients, new clients when they're coming in, and I show them the effect of inflation. If you're spending $60,000 as an example, for your living expenses today, in 10 years you're going to need about $80,000 to buy those same things. Think about that. $60,000 today, just 10 years down the road, and all of a sudden you're needing $80,000 just to maintain your standard of living. Well, if your money's not growing to stay ahead of inflation and taxes, you're going to have a problem there. Outliving your assets. This is one of the biggest fears that people have, and understandably, who wants to be broke, right, at the time when you need money the most? Inadequate income for a surviving spouse. This is when we do the planning. It's the same concept. We're looking ahead. If one were to predecease the other, would the survivors still be able to maintain their standard of living, quality of life? That's another of the questions that we answer when we do comprehensive planning. When we do that retirement income analysis that I talk about, that's one of the pieces that we get into. And then healthcare costs. As I mentioned, healthcare costs for a couple age 65, live 20 years in retirement, and you're looking at anywhere from $260,000 up to $400,000 out of pocket costs to you just for healthcare alone. All right, again, I'm going to throw out there for the first, you want to see how these things work and how it works for you. First 10 callers to my office, That's the number on your screen, 615-376-5325. This is a comprehensive plan I'm going to do for you, okay? First 10 callers. If you'd like to, get these questions answered, understand, how an investment analysis is a part of it, for example. Would you like to see what's in your portfolio? Would you like to see what your financial future looks like based on the things you're doing today, whether there's a likelihood of running out of money or whether you would be fine? Would you like to get some strategies that you could employ to improve that picture, to make sure that, in fact, you'd never have to worry about running out of money, that you'd be able to maintain your standard of living and quality of life and have some fun money to be able to do the things you want that give you joy in life, whatever that may be for you? It's traveling, if it's family stuff that you can do, whatever it is, that's part of the planning as well, as taking all that in consideration. It's about having that life, enjoying those retirement years. So again, first 10 callers, 615-376-5325. Tess is standing by. She'll take your information. She'll send you out a little packet including a checklist of things to bring to your appointment with me. And when you come in to see me, I'll also give you a free copy of my book, 7 Steps to Financial Freedom in Retirement. So again, there it is for you. We're going to go right into, because I've got a lot I want to cover with you this morning, right? One of them is this healthcare dilemma. This is where a lot of times when clients come in for the first time, they're thinking, well, once I reach age 65, right, Medicare, and then I shouldn't have to worry about healthcare anymore. Unfortunately, the healthcare costs anymore. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So managing the cost of healthcare, it's one of the most complex issues facing society, right? We see that because costs are going up so much faster than what inflation is. So when you've got inflation at around 2.3, but you've got healthcare costs rising at more like 6% and plus, prescription costs alone are going up at a rate of over 8% a year. So that kind of inflationary rate, think about that when you think of CPI. When we're planning for inflation, we're talking about CPI or CPIU at around 2 to a little over 2% for inflation rate. But when you take into consider healthcare and other things that we actually spend our money on daily, especially when you're retired, guess what? That number is going to be up a bit, right? At least 3% would be an average that we would want to calculate to make sure that we've got enough here when we're doing our planning. Likely among the greatest expenses in retirement, in fact, as I just mentioned, $260,000 to $400,000, and of course it ranks as one of the top concerns for retirees, because this is when people are coming in, how are we going to cover this? When we do your planning, we're planning that cost as a part of it to make sure that when we put your plan together and we develop the strategies to make sure you're not going to run out of money and that you're going to be able to maintain that standard living and even increase it, right? Have that fun money that you want. Healthcare costs is a big part of that, and we factor that in and show you how to do that as well. All right, so healthcare spending, again, has far outpaced inflation over the last decade. So if we look at the next slide, we see that, in fact, healthcare costs are almost 6% a year, whereas inflation at 2.7%. This is another part, and this is where it can have a significant impact on your finances, right? 38% have difficulty paying their bills, right? 27% have used up their savings. 16%, in fact, are even having to borrow money. We don't want to fit into that, right? We don't want to be, I don't want you having difficulty paying your bills. I don't want you using up your savings or, God forbid, having to borrow money just to be able to try to get by. Not a good plan. We can do better than that. So here's another thing to understand as far as the retirement income challenge when it comes to health care is the fact that health care is no longer, just like pensions, only about 20% of people that in the workforce will have a pension when they retire. Well, now look at the next slide and you can see that how much the health care costs. Used to be that health care was something that was provided. At one point back in just about 20 years ago, in fact, you had almost 30% of retirees would have a health care insurance or health care coverage as part of their retirement plan, part of their pension and such. Today, it's about half that at 14% and dwindling. Employers just do not cover that anymore. So that's something we have to plan for in retirement, just as with income. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, again, understanding how these things work is so important, because then if you understand them, if you see what these risks are, then we can plan for those risks and we can develop the strategies to make sure that you're going to be able, again, to maintain your standard of living, quality of life, no matter how long you live, right? So we're going to get into this more, and I'm going to show you how to protect yourself at the same time, okay? So join me here. We'll be right back on the Retirement Report.